And we are live. Welcome to the Listen to This Bull live show. This is the show where we expose the bullshit in the insurance world on both sides. And we have it open for commentary. So if you are watching this live, you can ask questions live. And in today's show, we're going to talk about some stuff that is fire. Literally, we're going to talk about fire. But we're going to have someone come on here and discuss this from his perspective as well. A guy named Sean Blank. You guys know who that is, Paladin Public Adjusters. He just jumped into the background, so I'm going to pull him on in just a second. Fortunately, Remington's going to jump in for like 5 minutes because he finally made it down to Florida, and it probably not going to be for a little while. So let me get this thing started. All right, so I got Sean Blank of Paladin Public Adjusters. I'm going to pull him in right now. Sean, I hope your audio is good. What's up, buddy?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Doing good.
Sorry about that. I'm a little technically challenged sometimes. So
you look like the kind of guy that might be.
But I got on, so that's good. I didn't have to have anybody do it for me. So
Paladin Insurance
Advocates. That's actually the name of the company. So
yeah, I was way off. So tell me a little bit about your company and your experience with fire claims, just to establish you as someone that would be an expert.
Okay, so Paladin Insurance Advocates is I've been a public adjuster for 11 years. Licensed in Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, South Carolina, Iowa, and Kentucky and Tennessee. So I've been doing this, like I said, as a public adjuster for 11 years. Prior to that, my first job out of high school was actually in a restoration company my uncle owned. So I've been actually in the industry for 36 years. So 36 years, done thousands of fires, and finally, like a week or two ago, did my first depositions.
How many of those fires did you set?
None myself, but I know some people. You know what I mean? But,
you know some people. Yeah. You can make things happen. Real quick, I often have a interesting beer while I'm on the show. This is the first time I'm having this one. I've got a minted Holiday Imperial Stout, chocolate and mint oil, and I got to be honest, it's terrible.
I just stick with the Angry Orchards.
Yeah. So, my wife is gluten-free, so we end up doing a lot of the Angry Orchards and other hard ciders. I might switch to the interesting hard cider that I have. I'm going to try one more sip.
Yeah, I had my gallbladder out. Since I had my gallbladder out, foam doesn't do well from beer. So
I really wanted to like this one. Give me 2 seconds. All right. Luckily, I have a fridge filled with beer in my studio. Didn't have to go very far. So I'm going to try this now, a key lime apple cider. I don't know if you can see that very well.
I do.
Made by Daughters. Hopefully this one will work out. So you've done thousands of fires.
Probably, yeah. We've tried to figure it out. You figure it out over 36 years and, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 fires a year. And, as a contractor and a PA. So I haven't done that many as a PA, but I've done, hundreds, maybe 1,000. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really good. All right. Daughters for the win. And it saved me from this. Fortunately, I thought I would like this one because I tend to like stouts and porters. And I think I bought a 6-pack of this. And I don't even think I can get through this entire can. So this is really good, though. This is key lime apple cider. I'm impressed. All right. So if you were a brand new person wanting to get involved with fires, I've had this question so many times, Sean.
Okay.
And by the way, for the audience's sake, Sean has been to a ton of my classes. This is the kind of guy that doesn't believe that he knows everything. He's always trying to improve himself. I really like people like that because I don't know everything. I'm going to ask the right people different things, and you're never done learning. I learn more from brand new people than most others as well at this point. But Sean is, and he always brings his company around with him.
Yeah, I always try to go to a new, like a class or something, at least every quarter. So
I think that's very good.
get you into different places, meet people like you and others. So.
Right. Now, to be completely fair, he's never taken a class with me about fire, so I can't claim that I taught him everything I know.
That's good. I have not. You're right. You talk a lot about roofs that I didn't know. So
yeah, okay. All right. So I get this question a lot from PAs that are trying to break into fire claims, and they're worried about it. They're nervous about it. And in fact, the very first fire claim that I ever had, I was nervous about, and I ended up pushing it off and handing it off to other people. And I got a whole bunch of fires in that I didn't handle at first because I didn't feel like I was competent enough to do so. And I'm the kind of guy that needs to feel like I'm competent before I put my name on it. Right. Sure. So I handled a lot of these off. But eventually talking to one of my mentors, Anita Taff, if you guys know who that is, she's a ex-NAPIA president, but also ex-GAPIA president, but she did a lot of fires, and she's like, you just got to do one and learn along the way. And she helped me out. She handheld me through my first couple of fires. But to be honest, it isn't that bad, but it is, for whatever reason, scary to jump into that side of things. Why is that, you think?
Well, I always tell people that, your home's your single biggest investment, right? Most people, your home's your single biggest investment. And, you just lost everything you own. And, you put your faith into the insurance company. And sometimes insurance companies just aren't trustworthy enough to handle your home and your future and, everything you've built in your life. So, hiring an expert to be on your side. I always tell people, you have an accountant that does your taxes, right? A barber cuts your hair, you get professionals to do professional stuff. And when you're dealing with fires, it's a whole different ballgame. And again, it's there's a lot of money involved in it. You got to do it right. So.
All right. So if you're brand new and you want to get into this, we're talking about basics for fire losses. Then what are the main concerns with a fire loss that everybody should be able?
So I always, the biggest part, and I've heard people on your podcast before and other, PAs, it's, just document everything, document. I've even gone to, and I hate to do it, but I've even gone to recording all my phone conversations with adjusters. You just have to. And luckily, Indiana, where I'm from, is a one-party state, so you don't have to inform them of it. And and documenting everything. And when an adjuster sends you an email, or when you're talking on the phone, and the adjuster says something, you follow it up with an email, just a follow-up email, just real quick. Hey, we were talking about this, and was this true? And if it's not, please let me know my misunderstanding, and I'll fix it. So, which is
you got to do that. I want to reiterate that. I just got off the engineer review with someone. I do engineer reviews as a consultation. And while we were going through it, they were telling me a story about how the engineer damaged a shingle right in front of them. Even though he was claiming that the shingles were not brittle, he ended up lifting a shingle and it broke in his hand, and he marked it as damage right in front of them. And they said, you just broke that. And he said, no, it was already damaged, but it was clearly that it wasn't. But they didn't have a recording. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I have to ask, did you record that? You got that on recording, right? And they're like, no, because people are afraid to put a camera on someone else because they don't want to be rude.
Mm-hmm. I'd rather be rude and identify my insurer than, so. But.
You're there to help someone else. It's you can be rude. It's okay to be rude. It's business. Come on, guys. Got to record this stuff. So if you're in a one-party state, especially easy to record everything. If you're used to being on camera and you're acting normal, people aren't going to freak out. Mm-hmm. If you're in a two-party state, you might have to get permission, or you might have to and talk to a lawyer about this. I'm not an attorney. In a two-party state, you are still bringing someone onto private property. There's no reasonable expectation of privacy there. So recording what's going on private property is something that the policyholder is definitely allowed to do. If the policyholder were to request that you record everything that's happening on their property, then you may have to do that. You know that that's true because they're allowed to put security cameras up all over the place without getting everybody that walks past the house to sign off on something saying that they're on security camera. There's no expectation of privacy on private property, except for in the bathroom. So if the policyholder wants you to record, then you can record, even in those states. ask an attorney. You might even get an affidavit that the attorney might be able to put together for you where the policyholder signs off and says, I want to know what's going on. But dude, those recordings are so important. I can't tell you how important they are. It's ridiculous.
And I didn't do it for a lot of years, and I started doing it just, I mean, literally, I mean, you know, we bought new recorders for all of our phone systems. We bought personal handheld ones for everybody. So Jeremy Walls, but you know, we've been doing a lot of that lately that we've never done before, and it's because, you know, the insurance companies are getting pretty hard to deal with. So
yeah. All right. So other than recording, what else should the people be aware of?
I mean, the way I consider it, we're not public adjusters aren't in a competition, right? There is more than enough claims for all of us. So I always tell people, you know, if you want to learn something, I'll just ask me, right? I mean, I've asked you stuff on roofs before. Literally called you on a job site and said, hey, I don't know about this, so what do I do? And you know, like I said, it was a side thing, but you know, you help me out. And I think if you have people that you know, through Facebook or whatever, just ask them. I mean, I'm happy to help people. I help people all the time. I've mentored several people. One of the people I mentored was on your show not too long ago, Cole Klein. Cole Klein, when he first started, you know, he rolled up on his first job in Hammond, Indiana, with you know, his tattoos hanging out, gauges in his ears. You know, I'm like, hey, you know,
he had gauges in his ears.
Gauges in his ears, yeah. I'm like, hey, you know, you got to take those out, dude. I mean, you know, you're a professional now. You're not a kid, you know, anymore. So, you know,
I didn't know that.
I helped him, and you know, he was kind enough to actually split some of his claims with me. I told him, you don't have to, but he wanted to learn, and he was eager to learn, and you know, I was able to, you know, walk him through that. Now he's bigger, way bigger than I am. So the one thing he didn't listen to me about is I told him, you know, in business, one of my first thing I learned in business was stay small and make money. You know, it's like the more people, more overhead. He didn't listen very well, but he's doing very well. So.
Yeah, his ears shrank back up pretty well, though. That must have, and that is so incongruous from the type of personality that I perceive in him. I'm gonna have to give him some shit about that. Then again, he gave me shit right back for being someone that didn't have a beard at all when I first became a PA. So
yeah, I like Cole. He's come a long way. So
yeah, hopefully those photos never surface anywhere ever. All right, so ask questions and document everything and record if you can. And what else should I be aware of?
You know, the thing that we do a lot of that we didn't, again, do before is with the documentation is, you know, obviously photographs. I mean, that's a very big part of what we do. Company Cam, as always, you know, does a really good job on that. You know, we weren't really big on a CRM before. We just, you know, we had paper files, and some of them ended up being, you know, 2 or 3 feet thick. So we got into using a CRM. We use Job Nimbus for our CRM. You know, just documenting things through that and be able to, and then their customers are able to, you know, go in the portal and look at what they need to see and not call you as much. I mean, even though I had to call at 10 o'clock last night from an insured, but you know, and just being able to use all the technology out there, your FLIR cameras and all the stuff that's available to you now that was not when I started doing this kind of business. I mean, I literally, and this is no bullshit, my first estimates, I used to do on a typewriter in my grandma's kitchen on the kitchen table when I was 19 years old.
Are you serious?
There was no programs, or I was actually on the beta for Xactimate when it first came out, and I was like, this is bullshit. It's easier for me to just do it myself. So
that's usually how programs work in beta. They're usually crap. People want to get involved in beta programs. I've been wanting to get involved in a lot of beta programs, and ultimately it's kind of junk. I think CRMs are extremely valuable. I tell people often that the number one superpower that my PA firm had was that we had better notes than the carrier did. Our files were notated heavily, and I could go back 3 years and see how crappy my files were in comparison. But back then I used to think my files were the best files in the world. And I would look back 3 years from there and think, oh my God, these are horrible. But back then I used to think my files were the best files in the world. And you learn so much. But the thing that I learned the most, and this is not something that other PAs agree with, I write everything into my CRMs, literally everything. Every time I touch the file, I put it in the occasion there. Every time we have a strategy session, I put what my strategy is for the claim in the CRM. Everything. I could take a random claim with someone and scroll through our CRM notes And it would take 5 minutes to scroll through all of them for your typical claim. It's a lot of notes, but if I were to get sick and have to pass that file on to someone else, they would know exactly what happened. If I had to hand it off to an attorney, they would know exactly what happened. There's no confusion.
Correct.
None.
Especially attorneys are asking for that a lot lately. So,
oh, they want it. And they don't want to read through all that. So we end up giving attorneys a bullet point, and we have all the files and everything separated into a nice order when we send them a link to all of our files. And the CRM notes are saved as a PDF in there, but we give them bullet points on what the important parts are, because, attorneys, they're not going to read through all that. You'd think that they would. You'd think that they'd know exactly what to go to. They don't. They want the bullet points too, because they're not PAs. They're not contractors. They know how the law works. They don't necessarily know how the claim is supposed to go. So, but my point is, in the CRM, All Good Adjustments, my company, before I sold it, we were the biggest PA firm in Georgia at the time. It was all about our documentation. It was all about our notes more than anything else. And we were good at the photos. We were good at the video and everything, but it was the notes more than anything else. I also think that there are a few good CRMs out there. I'm a big fan of Claim Titan. Claim Titan is a new CRM, and they have taken every recommendation that I've given them, and they've implemented it, every single one, which is blowing my mind because no one ever does that. But it is a very good CRM at this point for public adjusters. If you guys are interested at all in Claim Titan, let them know that you heard about it on the show so that I can get them to sponsor the show or something. That'd be great. But that is a really good system. Job Nimbus I've used before, and it was decent. Claim Titan, that's my go-to at this point.
Is it customizable? That's the thing I liked about
it. It is very customizable, intuitive. You can do all the same automations. It can do everything that Job Nimbus can do. It tracks certain things better for public adjusters. Job Nimbus was designed for contractors. I had some issues with Job Nimbus when I had them. Our contractors were able to log in to see all the claims that they referred to us. And every now and then that portal would break and they would be able to see everybody's claims. And I worked with a lot of different contractors. So when they noticed that they could see other contractors' claims, obviously they knew that those other contractors could see their claims, and they got really pissed off. And that happened 5 or 6 times. I don't know if they fixed that since then. It's been probably 5 years since I used Job Nimbus, but that was why we got away from Job Nimbus. Otherwise, we were pretty happy with it at the time. So anyway, that's my Claim Titan plug for a good buddy of mine who actually put some stuff in there that I think is worthwhile. So Claim Titan. Let me say one more time and then I'll get off of it. Claim Titan.
All right.
And now I'm going to take a snippet of that and I'm going to send it to him and ask him to buy me a beer.
Chocolate mint.
All right. We're documenting in the CRM. You mentioned FLIR cameras. Are there any what other equipment do you normally bring on site for a fire loss?
Oh, geez. I got a lot of them. I use a Matterport still, kind of old fashioned. I use a Matterport. I use we have.
Did you just call Matterport old fashioned?
Well, I know everybody's been using their cell phones and shit now. I don't even know what they do with those things anymore. But the Matterport is my go-to. I actually I have a laptop that's kind of indestructible, kind of one of those ones you see on TV the soldiers carry, and I'll take a stand over there and I'll do like total loss stuff right there on the job site. It's satellite. You can hook up to it and do everything right at the job site. I can have my estimate done before I even leave, especially like on a total loss. And then let's see, I've got bags, and we have the microscope cameras, and just bags and bags of stuff, water meters, the FLIR, drones. We have light setups and just a lot of stuff. I don't even know it all. I have a picture of it that I put on the internet one time of everything, and there's just there's tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment there, easy, but it just makes your job easier too. So, and when you
bring around like wipes and different things for like smoke damage and stuff like that.
Actually, you know what I learned from Cole. Actually, I used to use chem sponges like Surf Pro, or Service Master. He taught me to use their white makeup sponges. You just the white little makeup sponges, and instead of using instead of using a chem sponge like that the contractors use, that's already brown, right? This guy doesn't really show anything. If you use the makeup sponges that are white, and you can rub it on there, and you can tell the difference between.
Cotton rounds. I use them for my 3D printing to clean off the plate on 3D printing as well. But they're white and they're circular, and they're thin enough that you could wipe something, stick it in a Ziploc bag, and keep it if you wanted to, and have a good trail of where it came from. So, what kind of things would you be wiping for? What are you looking for when you wipe?
I mean, the difference between a soot and dust. You know what I mean? It's pretty noticeable. Soot is more black and less hairs and stuff in it. We also do smoke testing. I do smoke testing on almost every job, even if I don't have to use it. We take a strip test. They're just like a tape test, and we take those and put them in
tape lift test. We stick a piece of tape on there and then lift it off.
Yep.
What do you have tested for?
So we haven't tested for smoke particles and PICs, the particles of incomplete combustion, and then we actually have a machine that we can do, and I don't remember the name of it, but you put a little cartridge on it and set it right in the middle of the room, and it'll pick up the stuff. Airborne, anything airborne, and we actually took a picture. It was a really good picture of when some people were doing.
You're doing all this yourself. You're not having someone come in to get the cartridges. You're doing that and sending it to a lab yourself? Mm-hmm. No kidding.
Yeah, I've not done that. And then if they want to bring an IH, or we can bring an IH, we have IHs that we deal with. And then if they want to bring an IH, it's hard to argue with science, right? So if you're saying that there's nothing in the walls, right? There's no soot in those walls. Well, you can take a cover off the electrical outlet, stick a little tube in there, suck out the stuff in there, and if there's smoke in there, there is. If there's not, there's not. You can't argue science, right? They still try, but it's like it's pretty self-explanatory when you say there's no soot in the wall, and you take it and you pull this machine out and you suck it out and send it to a lab. You can do it right in front of them, right? I mean, put it right in the UPS envelope, put it right in front of them, and you can even give it to them and tell them to go drop it in the mail if you want to. So,
did it give you any issues on the chain of custody for those at all, since you're taking it yourself?
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is if I find smoke there, if they want to argue chain of custody, well, bring your own IH. He's not going to lie. An IH is not like an engineer's. I mean, I don't know all engineers lie.
I don't know. I've met a few do some weird shit. To be honest,
at that point, then that point you can prove it, right? So at that point you can say, let's do a chain of custody. Let's take it literally and have the FedEx guy come to the house. I've had that before. I've had them do a FedEx pickup at the house with the adjuster and an IH, dropped it in an envelope and handed it to them. So there's things that you have to do that are just sometimes ridiculous, but you have that option. So the first one, yes, they say, you did that. You could have done that at anybody's house. Well, that's fine. Because they do the same thing. They used to do the same thing with pictures, right? They used to say the same thing with pictures. Oh, that could be another fire. How do we know it's that fire? So, and they always have a reason, but just got to be able to.
Photos are so easy to prove that they're from somewhere else now because of the metadata that's in the photos. There's just so easy to say different GPS tag in there, and you can try to get around it. But if your photo doesn't have the metadata in it, then it looks suspicious and it makes people weirded out. But finding this.
We take pictures and videos while we're doing it too. Like we literally.
I mean, that's great. I don't see any reason why you couldn't. Are there certain requirements in other states that are you aware of? Like asbestos, for example, certain people can do asbestos testing in some states, and then those people without having a certification or something can't do that same testing in other states. Is there anything like that for smoke or soot?
Not that I've heard of, no. Not at this point. I mean, there probably will be someday, but not at this point. So
I haven't seen anything like that myself. Where would you find smoke?
Smoke is really everywhere. What I try to find is like vertical surfaces, like especially if you go, go above door frames, go above, places that'll hold that stuff in and it'll sit there. If you try it on the wall, it's not as obvious as the top of a cabinet, top of a medicine cabinet, someplace where it's going to actually rest and set on. So, smoke is really.
It's a heavy particle then. Mm-hmm. And it settles like dust does, but maybe a little bit faster. Mm-hmm. But we see it on ceiling stuff too. Yeah.
If anybody's seen like a ring, like if you have a glass thing on your counter, you pick it up and you see a smoke ring, right? I mean, you can see where the glass was sitting and all the smoke around it. It's the same purpose, So.
depending on the way that the construction of the house is, if it's stick built, if it's all wood construction and you've got insulation on the walls, you could easily have air movement in the walls and have smoke and soot in the walls on the opposite side of the house from where the smoke damage had occurred or where the fire had occurred. It could be a small fire, and you can have smoke and soot in the walls on the opposite side of the house. I have seen that.
Correct.
How often do you have issues with that?
Every week, all the time. So we just literally had one that we actually just finished it. It was not too far from actually my house, but we had a fire, and it was a dog kennel in the foyer. It was a dog kennel in the foyer. Luckily, the dogs weren't there, but it was from a charger on a phone, and it caught that dog kennel on fire. And the only part that was charred was literally the dog kennel and the floor underneath it. So
Wow.
like a 2x4 or 2 foot by 4 foot area was burnt, and we had to gut the whole entire house just from smoke. And
That's amazing.
And that was a Big Red, and Big Red did not want to do it.
Yeah.
Big Red did not want to do it, but when we showed him all the evidence, they ended up doing it. So
Big Red will do what they don't want to do sometimes. Sherry's got a really good question here. I'm surprised I haven't asked this question myself before because it's really good. If days or weeks have passed from the time you do your smoke test and they send an IH for testing, does the smoke dissipate? Does it go away? Would the IH have different results because of the time that has expired?
I don't think so, unless perhaps you maybe have cleaned it by then or whatever. I mean, I don't think it goes there. If you have dust in your house, it doesn't go away unless you dust it, right? So I don't believe so. I've never had that problem, but I've never had them call me out on, calling an IH in. Well, I did have one, but call an IH in after the fact. But I mean, that was so apparent. It's just one of those arguments that they just were going to keep making. But I mean, dust doesn't go away. I don't think soot goes away unless you wipe it up. So
it would be an easy test to figure this out, though, if you were to do your own testing and then go back a month later and do the test and see if there was a change. It's a really good question, though, Sherry. I like where your head's at. Really good question. James is saying that smoke will go from high pressure areas to low pressure areas just because the air is going to flow into those low pressure areas, almost like a vacuum. I mean, that's going to happen. And if you're introducing heat into an environment, you're going to make lower pressure from that heat that the air is going to move into. So you're creating airflow, which is why it ends up in the walls sometimes.
Actually, James taught me, and James, if you guys never met James Taylor, he's forgot most. I mean, he was a contractor for years, and then he became a PA. Actually, I helped him. Well, he used some of my study materials for his test, but he taught me about a line of demarcation from the high low to low pressure. He's taught me a lot. Again, I've been doing this for 36 years, and he's been doing it for a week, and not really, but he's been doing it for a while. But he's much smarter than I am. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. If I have a question, I was on the phone with James today, asking him the question about Xactimate, and he's self-taught himself with Xactimate. He's never even been to an Xactimate class. I've been to 3 of them. And I had to ask him for stuff. So, and that's one of the things I'm saying. If I need help, I'm going to call somebody. I'm not afraid. So
I was self-taught in Xactimate myself. And then after I stopped writing Xactimate's estimates, I eventually took a class with Andrew Behrens. He's got an online course set. He was on the show last week. And I found out all the ways that I could have saved myself a shit ton of time had I actually taken a class to begin with. I knew how to do it my way, but there was better ways to accomplish what I was doing. So being self-taught in Xactimate, it's great, but you should still get yourself certified. Holy crap, the amount of time you could save yourself is crazy. That sounds like the kind of guy that you want to have on speed dial, though, if you're dealing with a lot of stuff. The demarcation line that you mentioned, I've had industrial hygienists rolled my eyes when you said industrial hygienists don't act like engineers. I've had industrial hygienists tell me that there's a demarcation line where the damage stops, and that's where any asbestos is in the walls, they're going to stop. They're going to cut the wall at a stud that contains asbestos, and they're going to take that drywall off that has the asbestos that has been affected by the fire or the water, because every fire loss that has a fire department involved is also a water loss. And they're going to remove that under encapsulation because that's what you're required to do for asbestos during the abatement process. And then they're going to spray paint the remaining drywall that's still sitting there on the stud, spray paint it with brightly colored paint. And then have someone come in with new drywall, put new mud, new tape line there. And when they're sanding, they'll know when to stop sanding when they see brightly colored paint.
It sounds like a lot of time there involved in that.
There's a lot of vibration for a wall that has a lot of asbestos in it. Wow. And technically they're not wrong. As long as you do all that under encapsulation, full PPE, you're cleaning yourself off all this shit. If you're doing new drywall work in full abatement gear, then yeah, you could do that. But you'd have to do air quality testing and everything afterwards as well. The problem is that most of the time when the insurance company gets a report like that, they don't talk about the drywall installer having all that abatement gear on and the amount of additional work that requires and labor. So if you're going to estimate it that way, that's one thing. God, it pissed me off. So there are companies that are careful with them. But do you test for asbestos on your claims?
I test. If it's a certain year and if I think there's asbestos, I'll look at we had one in not too far from here that the attic was opened up and the insulation had a lot of hair on it. I thought it was asbestos. We had it tested and it was not. So we had some tile tested and the glue was not. When I could have swore it would be, the mastic was not. So I mean, it kind of goes both ways. But again, I can't argue with science any more than they can. If you send it to a lab and the lab says it's not asbestos, it's not asbestos. So
if it's not asbestos, it's fine. I can tell you this, and maybe a lot of people don't know this, but in most states, you are required, if you're going to do any work on a property, to actually test for asbestos before performing work, regardless of whether or not it's been cleared before, regardless of when it was built. If you are performing work in a home, you have to test it. If you're performing work on a commercial property under the NESHAP rules, you have to test for it. So you should, and it would be paid for because it is required by law for you to do these kind of testing. You should do it every time. You'd be surprised what has asbestos in it. I mean, they were allowed to install asbestos in most states in materials with asbestos in it. They were allowed to install up to like 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Drop ceiling tiles had asbestos in it in the U.S. new at the store like 3 years ago. So I mean, there's a lot of asbestos. Keep in mind, there's very few policies that exclude asbestos from a fire loss or a water loss. They exclude it under the liability section. So if someone were to get sick or injured because of the asbestos in your home, there would be exclusions there. But the vast majority of policies still cover the abatement of asbestos if the property is damaged and they have to remove asbestos containing materials. So keep that in mind. I think you have to test for it. If you get the testing done, you'd be surprised what the claims look like if you start doing that every time anyway.
Same thing with lead. Lead's the same. They have the same rules.
Now, there are cutoffs for lead. You don't have to test for lead if the home was built after a certain year, and that might be different from one state to the next, so I'm not going to say the year. But with asbestos, as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, you're required in every state. But just for the sake of every state being different, I'm just going to say most states require you, if you're doing anything with a drywall or anything with any kind of interior work, you're required to test for asbestos and anything that could contain asbestos. So the mud could contain asbestos, the drywall could. Test it. You'd be surprised how often you end up finding it anyway. Here's a good question. Does formaldehyde release toxic gases when high heat makes contact with it, such as the trace amounts of formaldehyde in OSB? Is there formaldehyde in OSB?
There's formaldehyde in furniture. There's formaldehyde in every carpeting. There's in a lot of stuff. But
is there really?
Yeah, that's why firefighters are getting so sick from that stuff. But I mean, I guess I don't. Does formaldehyde release toxic gases when high heat makes contact with it? I mean, I would say yes, but I mean, what is the? I mean, I don't know. I mean, the purpose of the question is what? I mean,
yeah. What's the safe amount that could be in the air?
Yeah.
And does it go away when the heat is gone? Be a good question. Is it still off gassing after the heat's gone? There was a big stink about drywall from China for a while. They had a lot of his formaldehyde in it, and if you ended up having that, they would end up removing it because it off gassed. I didn't know OSB had formaldehyde in it.
I think it's probably the glue. I mean, I think a lot of stuff does. So
I wonder if that's I mean, obviously that's why it's exterior only. I know that there's a lot of waterproofing chemicals that go into wood that include formaldehyde and things. So the exterior grade woods a lot of times that are chemically treated. I never thought about it for OSB. That's a really good question.
It is a good question. I'll look into it.
High heat will cause some damage to a lot of components, though. Metal components get damaged by high heat.
Absolutely. They'll pit, they'll rust. I mean, I actually went to a class where they, taught us how to, that when they were doing pack outs and stuff to, clean that or, put WD-40 on the hinges and all that stuff to, so it doesn't rust. So you're able to maybe still possibly use that stuff. So
if you're going in attics, the gang plates, the gusset plates that are on trusses and things, the gang nails, whatever you want to call them, at 485 degrees Celsius,
mm-hmm.
the zinc coating on galvanized plates like that will degrade, and it'll turn like a rainbowish color. But it also might just oxidize heavily, but it will end up rusting. Trusses are often thought of by fire departments as firefighter killers because the gusset plates, when they get hot, they expand at a much larger rate than the wood does because they're metal. And you have all these little nails in there. They're expanding outward from each other, and they're making the holes that the gang plates have in the wood bigger. Mm-hmm. And then when the heat goes away, it shrinks. And now those holes are huge in the trusses. And they can just kind of fall apart. They're no longer as structurally sound as they were before. So there are certain issues related to heat to be aware of. Any kind of a coating that is on a metal to prevent rust can be degraded with heat. And a lot of times it's 485 degrees Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, seems to be a cutoff for a lot of the metals that are in the.
Interesting. I had a guy just had a propane torch. He was doing at his own house. He was doing some work on the propane torch, and the torch blew up in his hands, blew him out in the hallway, and blew his whole house out, blew the roof up, and it did the same thing. You were talking about the gusset plates tore, and this was from a propane torch that you use for doing plumbing. Yeah. He literally was bent over, and that damn thing blew up, blew him back in the hallway, and it blew his whole house out. Actually, James Taylor, I think, was the appraiser on that one. So it was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. It just blew his whole house apart and had to get almost his whole house rebuilt.
Restoration Industry Association has a fire loss specialist designation, and IICRC has a fire and smoke tech certification. They do have a standard for fire and smoke cleaning now as well, which we've been waiting for forever.
Is it out now?
With RIA to be able to put that out together, IICRC and IRA. So I'm really excited about that. I haven't actually looked at that standard yet because I haven't worked a fire claim myself in so long, and I don't normally get hired as a consultant for those kind.
But is it out now? I haven't heard it's out yet.
Say again?
I don't think is it out yet? I know they were doing it, but I didn't know it was out yet. Actually, James Taylor, the guy that
it's still pending. James says it's still pending.
He's on the team for that.
They've been so all right. I thought it was out because they said it just 3 more months, and that was definitely more than 3 months ago. But to be fair, they said that to me so many times. Mm-hmm. So it keeps getting pushed back. It sounds like it's still pending. David says it's just tuning in. Oh, I thought he was going to say it was just turned in, the standard. So James says the RAFLS program recommends 12 air changes an hour for air scrubbers to assist in diluting the air for combustion byproducts and off-gassing materials. Far higher than the minimum 4 changes an hour recommended as a base setting for contaminants. That's pretty significant. It would take a lot of blowers, a lot of negative air machines, probably to be able to produce that, especially if you have vaulted ceilings and things with a lot of volume in that room. I'm not sure every house would be capable of doing that many air exchanges in a certain period of time.
I know that we have that in our F9 notes for everything we do. So
yeah,
in the OSHA standards and everything for all that. In our opening statements, our F9 notes, a lot of different things.
All right. So if I'm a brand new guy, I want to get into fires, and I'm looking for smoke. I've got my circle cotton rounds and I'm wiping walls and this gray matter comes off on it, I'm like, yeah, that's smoke. And I'm bagging it and I'm tagging it and I'm putting it to the side and I'm taking off outlet covers and I'm kind of wiping behind it, taking photos of the insulation around the outlet covers because there might be some smoke in there that has discolored the insulation, right? I'm getting into AC vents, the outlets. I'm taking a look inside there to see if there's anything in there. I'm also looking at the intake, see if there's anything that's built up in there, and I might be able to see some discoloration on metal ducting, but I'm also looking to see if there's any gaps between the ducting and the walls to see if any of that coloration persists in the insulation. Where else might I look for smoke?
So, I mean, that's pretty much, I mean, a big part of it, but I know you can look behind dressers, someplace that, someplace is not as obvious, and that's just for trying to get different, like let's say they only want to clean half the house and gut half the house, just different places. But I mean, that's a lot of them, I mean, I'm sure everybody has their own opinion, but I mean, I find them in all those places you mentioned, like you're saying, the cold air returns, any kind of duct work. I mean, if your furnace is running, if your air was running, the soot was traveling through the whole house at that point. There's nothing to stop it, when it goes in the cold air return and shoots it back out the furnace, the same air quality, it's going through the house. And that's why, if there's not generally a time in somebody's house, I mean, my air conditioning is going right now. So there's some time in the house that you're either going to have air or you're going to have heat. And those are going to go through every single room in the house when they're on.
So David asked a decent question. If a roof goes through a fire, does it need to be replaced every or most of the time or rarely? I mentioned a temperature earlier, 485 degrees Celsius. I looked it up. That's 905 degrees Fahrenheit. If there's a fire involved in a roof, most likely that attic, at least in parts of it, is going to get above 905 degrees Fahrenheit. Most house fires are going to be above that temperature range. Whether or not you'd have that temperature at the far end of an attic, if one part of it is on fire or not, is a good question, but you're still going to have the smoke going through the house, which would have to be cleaned up. But I think if you're going to have a fire in a roof involved, most likely you're replacing the roof.
And even if it's not for that reason, David, I mean, if the roof even is able to not, I mean, it can get brittle. There could be a lot of things that happen, but your OSB, your roof decking is 90% of the time. If it's that way, you have to take the decking off. To get the decking off, you got to take the roof off. So, I mean, I think you can, I always like to tell, my favorite thing is, we can all drive to Matt's house. If you go this way and I go that way, I don't care as long as we get there, right? So they can call it whatever they want. The roofs get replaced because the OSBs get replaced. The OSBs get replaced because the smoke is in there. It's porous. There's no way to get it out. You can't expunge it out, and you're not going to spray kills on the stuff. So not in my town. We don't do kills. So
all right. So that's one of those things that we hear all the time, though, is that you could just encapsulate the attic to keep the smokes down, the smoke smell and everything like that. Is it just the smell that I should be worried about, or is there something more to it?
Well, I mean, so here's the thing: is first of all, kills or anything like that, the encapsulates like that is not it's a stain blocker, right? It's not meant to hold odor in, but even if they use it for that, and I believe, again, it was James Taylor who taught me this, is it's only got a 7-year guarantee. Kills only has a 7-year guarantee. So what do you do on the 8th year? On the 10th year, if your house then starts smelling like smoke, or somebody brushes it at that point or whatever, if it's not guaranteed for life, then it's something that has to be addressed. And we address it all the time. So, nobody sprays kills on one of my jobs without a hell of a fight. So, and I don't do it because, again, here's the thing is, if you go up into an attic of a house, right, and that had a fire, are you going to buy it if it's full of white paint? I know I'm not, because I know what happened now. It's had a fire or mold or something, and they've just covered it up. And that's just a cover up. It's not a cure, right? It's just a Band-Aid for the disease. So,
Smoke smells bad, but it's not that big of a deal, is it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, try living with it. I've had actually adjusters say, well, they have a fireplace. It's like, yeah, I get they have a fireplace. Their house already smells like smoke. I'm like, well,
It's different smoke, though. If you've got a fireplace, you're burning hardwoods probably in there. Those hardwoods have the same chemicals that the rest of your house does. If you have materials in your home that are burning, there's class 1 carcinogens in this soot from a house fire.
Correct. And that's why firemen, like I said, firemen nowadays are, and I hate to say it because they're very brave and, they do a great job, but they're dropping like flies from cancer from the carcinogens. I mean, like you used to have a cotton shirt. Well, now you have a cotton shirt that has 40 other different stuff in it. And again, formaldehyde and the couches and when that stuff burns, it's so nasty and so bad for you. It's like, you got to get it out of there. You can't just cover it up.
No, you can't. And there's lots of claims these days for ash, soot, and smoke, commonly referred to as the ass claims. But there's a lot that's there. And in California, State Farm and Allstate just pulled out of those markets because of the amount of ash, soot, and smoke claims that are coming out of there. It is very hazardous to health. Having that in your home, especially when you have kids or someone that has respiratory issues, is not good. Nick asked a question: when the heat is so hot and you can see that the sap has seeped out of the framing, are there concerns for flammability, delamination?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we definitely we look for, and that's something that we'll point out to the adjuster, because yes, the sap comes out. It's definitely true. I mean, you can tell. I mean, there's sap on wood a lot, but it doesn't drip. It doesn't come out when it gets that hot. Then then the lumbers will not be good at that point. So
definitely change it, but maybe you made it better. I mean, there's kiln dried wood, and it's super good, right? It costs more, so maybe you made it better.
Sure, you should like that should be a commercial for State Farm. Huh?
Yeah, and if I worked for State Farm, I would mess with every PA I've ever met. They would have such a hard time.
They do. Believe me, they are not. I'm not a big fan of theirs. Let me tell you.
Nick says, what can I realistically expect on a fire claim on the middle floor of a 3-story house, spray foam insulation? Will spray foam insulation stop the smoke from traveling to the 3rd floor?
I mean,
there's a stairwell.
Yeah, and there's the vents, and there's all kinds of different ways for it to get there. So, and even with spray insulation, I mean, if it's got conduit, it's going to go through the conduit. It's going to go through. There's always a way for it to get there. Smoke gets anywhere. I mean, there's if you've seen house fires, or if you've even seen contractors that use a thermofogger, and you can watch it come out of the eaves of your house while they're thermofogging. You got to call the fire department nowadays, the thermofog, or they're going to come back to the house and think it's a rekindle. So, and that it just goes everywhere. Pressure testing a house, nowadays it's a lot better. They're built better, but they're still it's going to find a way. So.
Yeah, some of the newer houses are a little bit too tight, and they don't allow a lot of airflow because they're very, very efficient for energy savings. But a lot of the spray foams, and I know most of it is closed cell foam, but some of the spray foams that are in walls are actually open cell. And if it is open cell, then it is going to allow the smoke to travel through or absorb it even. So I would be a little bit concerned either way. Realistically, what you can expect, there's probably going to be less travel to the 3rd floor. Probably,
but still some. Yeah, and that might make that just a cleaning kind of a thing too. At that point, I had a lot of houses that were, half of it was clean and half of it was gutted. So it's not uncommon. But
Dave was asking if a Class A fire-rated roof goes through a forest fire with fire sitting on the roof. Will fire sitting on the roof spread the flame or not? And should it be replaced? I know why he's asking this. David works for EuroShield. EuroShield is a rubber roofing, and the EuroShield is not Class A fire rated. Mm-hmm. But it holds its current classification longer than asphalt shingles would. Asphalt shingles, they get their fire rating from the granules that are on them. Granules keep the asphalt from catching on fire over a period of time. So the more granules are on there, the less likely the asphalt will catch on fire for a longer period of time. Eventually, as the shingles age, the granules fall off and the asphalt becomes more exposed, then it's a little bit more or less fire resistant, I should say. IBHS says that granule loss from hail damage is functional damage because it can reduce the fire classification of asphalt shingles. So what he's asking is, if fire is sitting on the roof, will it spread? Yes. Yes, it will. Should it be replaced? If it's on fire, yeah. the houses across the street from a fire loss or even next door neighbors, the faces of if it's an asphalt shingle, the faces of the roof that are facing that house often have a shit ton of blisters on them because the heat is intense and it will cause damage to asphalt pretty rapidly. If a house, if the shingles are blistering on the next door, then of course they're blistering on the one that you're on now, and blisters remove the granules. So you're getting rid of that crap just from the excessive heat. And now it's not so fire resistant anymore. I don't think asphalt shingles are really that fire resistant.
Yeah, I'm not a big shingle guy.
The testing is quite right for it.
Yeah.
I thought with spray foam insulation, the fire just smoldered all through it. Is that true? I don't know. That's interesting.
I think what you're talking about with the open cell, I mean, it's very possible. I mean, it smolders in there and kind of goes up through the whole stuff.
I got a story from Dmitry Lipinski once. He used to live in Siberia, which is so cold that you could get caught outside and die just for being outside because it's so cold. And there was one town, the town next to theirs was so far away that if you broke down in the middle of that trip, you're very likely going to die from being so cold, and no one's coming. No one's coming for you. So his father in this story, I hope it's okay that I tell this story. It was such a good story. His father ended up breaking down on the way. And what they're told to do is to take the tires off your car and set the tires on fire because the rubber will burn for so long that you might be able to make it through the night until someone might come by that can rescue you. And that's what his father ended up doing. He lost a few toes, but he still survived it because he set his tires on fire. So there are certain materials that will light on fire and will stay on fire for longer than other materials. And rubber is one of those.
I'm sorry, can I say that? I'm just thinking my daughter is probably watching this, and she's gonna say, she's saying right now, if he dies, he dies. I'm sorry, I had to. I had to.
Man, I couldn't imagine living in a place like that, but I was just telling him that I was cold one day, and I got that story. So what are you gonna do? It was a crazy story. What types of damage should be looked for in adjacent structures? So the blistering on the shingles for sure. Is there anything else that they should be looking for?
Absolutely, smoke residue, soot, picks, particles of incomplete combustion. It all, if your windows are open, especially, right? If it's a nice day out, you got your windows open, and like you were talking with forest fires, it's the same thing, except more more intense, right? The house next door is caught fire. We've done lots of houses where we've done, I always tell my people while we're there, we'll go talk to the neighbor and see if they need our help. You know what I mean? Because their whole house, half of their house is the siding's melted off, the roof's melted off, the soffit, the fascia, or they're, like I said, they had the windows open or their air conditioner was going and it, sucked air through there. I mean, there's absolutely, you should do that. The only time you don't do that is if they're pissed off. If they're pissed off, as I told you.
Your kids are watching and they agree. If he dies, he dies. That's pretty funny.
It's a Rocky thing, but anyways, if you do go to the neighbor's house, you just got to make sure that they like each other, because your first priority obviously is the person at the fire. So if you're dealing with the neighbor, it's kind of a conflict of interest. If the neighbor's like, he did this and it was his fault, so I kind of stay away from those things. But if they're cool and if they're okay with me hiring next door, I will. So.
I never thought about that. So because there's a potential for subrogation or something along those lines, you can't represent both clients. I never thought about that.
I had one just last couple of years ago, real good customer, and he it was a total accident. He was a smoking accident, but he burned his house. It wasn't even 8 months old. He burned his brand new house down and the neighbor's house, and the neighbor absolutely hated him. And I, would have loved it on both of them, but I could only do one. So,
Would you be required to recuse yourself from one of them if you found out that there was a conflict there?
I've never.
I mean, you're never involved in the subrogation portion of it. Mm-hmm. You're just dealing with the homeowner's insurance. I don't know if it was.
I think it's more of but I'm talking about the conflict is more of like a personal conflict.
It's definitely a personal conflict.
So
from a policy standpoint, as a PA, you're required to represent the best interests of that policyholder. I think you potentially could do that for both.
I've done it many
would cause some potential weirdness between you and your clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll always ask my client, do you mind if I go talk to the neighbor? And they'll be like, absolutely not. That's fine. Or they'll be like, screw him. I don't want, anything to do with him.
Yeah. Melted siding is one of those things. David says he's heard. Same results can come from coatings coming off of plastic synthetics. Wind-driven smoke, like wind-driven rain, but smoke. Obviously, that must be a thing. It does drive. You can actually get maps from wildfires of where the smoke has traveled because of wind. And with those maps, be able to identify that there's potential that what you're finding in the home, the smoke that's in your home, is from a specific event, and be able to get the claims there. They use a lot of that in areas like California where there's a lot of wildfires that ended up burning down homes. So it's not just trees that are burning. You end up with all the chemicals that come from the fires from the houses involved in that ash, soot, and smoke, very acidic as ash. Mm-hmm. So you can actually see those from those smoke trails.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting when you're talking about the acidity from smoke. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, the acidity from smoke getting inside your components of your TVs and your printers. And I very rarely do I mean, there's lots of companies that come and pick these people's TVs up and take them. I'm like, you can take them, you can have them, because you're going to replace them, because all that stuff with the acidity and the smoke and the components. I mean, I know the components aren't as exposed as they used to be, but you can see little wires on there, or just the circuit cards, right?
The circuit board, there's not that. They have little vents all over them where they're allowing heat exchange. Of course,
there's get in there.
Yeah. And it does create a latent damage, and they're going to work for a while, but they're going to fail early.
Well, and the first thing it does, and not depending on the age, but the first thing it does, any fire damage that you have to electronics, the warranty is null and void. If you have a fire, the first thing is that the warranty's done. So, and
warranties are covered by insurance policies, unless it specifically says that it doesn't.
Correct. So that's another thing we say is,
I've seen one policy ever that actually specified they don't pay for warranties. It was a Farmer's Smart plan. There's probably more.
Now, yeah, the stuff that they put in these policies now, like you were saying about Allstate and State Farm going out of the California market, I wish they go out of my market too, because some of the stuff that they put in these policies, I'm just like, why would somebody even have that policy? I mean, I wouldn't even have that policy on my house, that they don't cover, the appraisal clauses in State Farm's policies now is like, why do you even have appraisal?
I'll be honest, the policies aren't really that terrible. A lot of it has to do with the way the policies are applied. That is the issue. There's a lot of gotchas and loopholes and things that they use. And it's just because of the way that they're interpreting it to the policyholder, but it's not necessarily the actual interpretation of a policy or the legal interpretation based on case law. There's all kinds of issues that go along with that. Interpreting a policy in itself is difficult at times because you could read it so many different ways. There's ambiguity all throughout it. I actually do a class on this. Anyway, David says, yes, fine. Don't have both of those customers. Late to the party, sorry for repeating, rebuttal to adjusters saying tile surfaces can be cleaned. What do you think?
Tile's porous. I mean, even if it's like got a urethane or whatever on it, tile's porous. If the smoke gets into the grout, if it gets underneath the grout, tile's porous. I think it's got to come out.
So it's not necessarily the surface of the tile, but it's all the crap that's holding that tile in place that is really porous.
Correct.
So ignore the tile and go straight to the grout with your argument, guys.
And the tile is porous too. If it doesn't have a
lot of them are,
coating. So
there are some that are less porous than others, I would say. Anyway, it is. But most tile won't absorb water at the same rate that the mortar will. Your better argument is in the mortar and the grout.
Correct. I agree.
Current wildfire in Canada is affecting New York tri-state. Hey, all you ass claims guys, run over to New York. Although be careful, because that is a very different state in the way it works. Does acid rain come from fires or something else? That's a good question. I would imagine that acid rain comes from fires and pollution, and not just pollution, but the fires are causing pollution. So maybe it's pollution. I don't know, man. We're talking about claims. We're not friggin' environmental scientists, David. I don't know.
I did play it on TV one time. So.
Because homeowners don't know how the policies have been rewritten. Tile sealer. If there's sealer on the tile, does that prevent smoke from getting in?
Does it? I don't know. It could. I mean, it's
Do some testing under the tile. Unless it's the perfect tile setter ever, there's going to be some voids under there.
Mhm.
It can get in from underneath, depending on the type of material that is at the base of it, whatever it's set on.
I mean, you can always find a way, but I mean,
Yeah.
90%, 99% of the time, it's going to be affected. So
It's like dinosaurs. Life finds a way, and the smoke finds a way every single time. You just can't count on it. They're going to kill you one day. All right. Warranties can be avoided due to acid rain is why I asked. I know. Really though? Acid rain? Is there acid rain everywhere? Now I have to ask David a bunch of questions. We're going to ignore that. We're going to get back to that later on.
it's a whole nother class, right?
We have hours worth of time. I really appreciate your time on this, Sean. I know we always have a lot of questions about fire, but I think establishing the basics for people is good. And maybe I'll have you on again soon, and we can get beyond the basics a little bit and really get into some of the more nuanced portions of claims handling for fires. I think that'd be great.
Absolutely. I'll have James come up here and we'll do it together. So like I said, he knows.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We'll have James on here. James, well, you can give me his contact information.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you guys get a lot out of these shows, I really appreciate it if you could help us out. We are looking for sponsors. If you know someone that would want to be a sponsor for the show, we're actually going to be taking on sponsors for the first time. I've got some paperwork for them. I can send it out to you. So let me know if you think of someone. Our goal is to actually hire a full-time editor, producer guy to kind of follow us around and do a lot of things so that we can actually produce more content for you. So if you get a lot out of our content, we really need your help in finding those sponsors. So let me know. Send me an email, Matthew, spelled with one T, at listentothisbull.com. Sean, how do people get a hold of you?
You can get the best way to get a hold of me is www.paladincpia.com. I mean, that's my website, and just hit me a message, and or you can call me on my phone. I don't care. 219-246-7173.
That is now on a live podcast, his cell phone. People, you guys can call him anytime. He said so. So 3 a.m.
Yep. I get it all the time. I'm Chip Merlin. I just I give everybody my cell phone number. So
there you go. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. I will see you next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And good luck with the claims out there, guys.